Welcome to Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, where we aim to take you to the heart of ag policy. I'm your host, Lydia Johnson. We're bringing you a special edition of Newsmakers this week from the Farm Progress Show. Thousands of farmers and industry leaders gathered in Decatur, Illinois this week to see the newest ag innovations, unveil new products, and see field demonstrations of drones and equipment in action. Key political leaders also attend, including Deputy Ag Secretary Stephen Vaden, who teased that the Trump administration is discussing bridge financial assistance to help farmers make it into 2026. Talking to reporters, Vaden provided no details of what the assistance would look like. However, he noted that the department's spending authority under the Commodity Credit Corporation, which the first Trump administration used to provide 2 rounds of compensation to farmers for the trade war with China, would typically be refreshed in November. China, the largest customer of U.S. soybeans, has yet to make any purchases from the fall U.S. soybean crop. The American Soybean Association recently sent a letter to President Trump warning that the ag sector will be hit with extreme financial stress if a trade deal is not secured with China. We asked Caleb Ragland, president of the American Soybean Association, what the response has been to that letter.
Right now, we're in a very dire situation. September's upon us, harvest is starting in the deep south, and we have 0 bushels of soybeans on the books to be sold to China for this current crop that's about to come out of the field. Historically, over the last 5 years, about a third of soybean sales to China would be booked. China amounts to 25% of our total U.S. soybean crop. So that would be 8 or 9% of the whole U.S. crop would normally be on the books with China right now, and we have 0. That is alarming. The farm economy as a whole is struggling. Inflation has caused our cost of production to rise drastically on every front. Commodity prices, in particular soybeans, are down about 50% from where they were 3 years ago. And our numbers are deeply in the red. And we send this letter to President Trump because we've been talking for months about needing to have sales in place, a deal in place, a phase 2 type agreement that has purchase commitments along with a level playing field on trade with no tariffs, and we haven't had anything happen, unfortunately. And our appeal to President Trump and his administration is make soybeans a priority in any trade negotiations that are taking place. Soybeans are the #1 agriculture export to China, and in the last trade war, it was 71% of the losses that we had as American farmers, and they're critical.
Deputy Ag Secretary Stephen Vaden was at the Farm Progress Show yesterday. You had the chance to meet with him. I'm curious, what concerns you raised with him, and was he perceptive of those?
The request that we particularly made of Deputy Secretary Vaden and of Secretary Rollins is to make sure that this message is clearly communicated to President Trump and his upper level administration. I believe they're doing that. Vaden shared things with us yesterday about details of the work they're doing, and it gives me confidence that the message is delivered. And basically now the ball's in President Trump's court as to what we do about it. The farm economy is struggling. It was already struggling before tariffs were put in place, and that has made things exponentially worse. And we are very concerned about future months.
And the last trade war with China led to the phase 1 agreement in which China promised to buy a certain amount of U.S. commodities. Do you think that will happen again, or do you worry that circumstances have changed too much since then?
I have confidence in President Trump's ability as a negotiator, as a business person, to get a deal done. The phase 1 deal had a lot of opportunity in it for farmers, and in particular for soybeans. Unfortunately, there was a change and we didn't have follow through. Right now, we need to get a deal in place. We need to have commitments. We need to have follow through, and we need China to have their feet held to the fire to meet the agreements that they've made and to meet future agreements as well. And I think that is the big challenge. This is obviously a very complex geopolitical situation. There's much more than soybeans involved, but keeping people fed, getting them the protein they need, and some goodwill work to get the process started would be wonderful.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune recently said he's taking a wait-and-see approach to consider if producers need payments like USDA's 2018 market facilitation program to compensate growers for market loss due to the trade war. I mean, you mentioned just that economic stress, but as we look into the future, do you believe U.S. producers will need payments this fall to stay in operation and to keep their farms?
Well, as we've been stressing, the margins are very negative. Mississippi State Ag Econ put out a study a couple weeks ago that showed Mississippi soybean farmers were losing $207 on average for this year's crop. They're already deep into harvest ahead of the rest of the country, and that's a warning shot for us farther into the heartland of how bad things are. We much prefer to make money from the market. Disaster programs, payments, they don't make us whole. They're putting a Band-Aid on a big flesh wound. But that may be what it takes in the end, but we want opportunities from the market. We want to be able to make a profit from the market and keep our families fed. There's hundreds of thousands of farm families across this country that are completely dependent on ag for their income, and I'm one of those. I speak for every one of the 500,000 U.S. soybean farmers. We want to make our profit from the market, but we must have an equal playing field. We must have opportunities.
We'll be back with more Newsmakers right after this.
These are the farmers and ranchers who help build the America we depend on, and Farm Credit is here for them, supporting rural communities and agriculture with reliable, consistent credit and financial services. In good times and bad, we provide loans to farmers and ranchers, farmer-owned cooperatives, rural home buyers, agribusinesses, and rural infrastructure providers. We help agricultural producers feed the world. Learn more today.
I think some of sustainability to farmers just comes second nature. If you asked a farmer, are you sustainable? They'd probably look at you maybe a little funny and say, I don't think I'm doing anything that special, but it really is just what they do. We're all farmers, and our goal is taking the best care of our land, our cattle, our natural resources.
This is my sustainability story.
We're looking into harvest season with many uncertainties about the global trade landscape. We asked Steve Nicholson with Rabobank how he views the economic standing in farm country right now.
Yeah, so if we look at, and we're going to divide, so I'll stay with grain and oilseeds because that's what I do day to day, but I just have to say one thing about livestock. For livestock folks, we're in good world for them right now. So I'd love to be able to have as good a world that they're having in GNO, but we just don't. And so there's just so many things, and it's really a supply story this year. When you think about across the globe, we haven't had a year where every country's almost saying all 8 cylinders where we're getting full production. And that's where we are right now. It's also too a bit of a dichotomy in the US is that we're building corn stocks, but the world is not. It's just the opposite in soybeans, where the world's building soy stocks and we're not. And so it's a very weird world, but the fact is we just have so much supply in the world, that's just going to keep prices, really on the defensive.
And the U.S. is expecting a record corn crop this year, and China, the largest purchaser of U.S. soybeans, has yet to make a purchase from this fall's crop.
Right.
As you look at this situation from a global perspective, where do you see these grains going this fall, and how could that affect farmers' bottom line come harvest and looking ahead? Yeah.
So I think there's no doubt soybeans is the big concern because we export, 40-some% of our soybeans to the world that we produce, and China just, they didn't take any soybeans in June at all. I suspect July and August are going to look very, very similar, and you're right. If you look into the next crop year, China's a big old fat zero. And so I think that for China, they're going to go to Brazil because that's who they've kind of gotten in bed with. And because of the tariff wars, China's saying, fine, we'll just wait this out and go from there. Now, I will say, sort of parenthetically, China, if they're nothing, they're pragmatic. And, the fact is U.S. soybean prices and U.S. corn prices globally have been very competitive. And so, that puts a little different spin on it for China. How do you do that? Where do you go from here? But if you look at corn, it's a little different story. Yes, the U.S. is competitive. We only ship 10 to 15% of our production. But Brazil, even though they've produced a big crop this year, they're just filling the pipeline. And the fact is that Brazil continues to have logistics issues where they can't get stuff out the door on a timely manner. And so I think that puts the United States in a good position to continue to be a good exporter of corn globally and we're going to be competitive. So I think that we can look forward to that going forward. But the fact is, because of what we just talked about, even though exports on corn might be better than we anticipate, the fact is the prices are still going to be pretty low just because of the supply situation.
And we're still seeing conflict in Ukraine and the Black Sea region. I'm curious how that's affecting global trade and global oilseed trade.
So let's first give the Ukrainians their kudos. They've continued to export at a fairly good pace, even though they have all this conflict, as you say in your question. So we have to at least acknowledge that. But the fact is, we're seeing a slow degradation of their production capacity because of, the war, labor, bad soil situation with toxicities or compaction or trenches, whatever. And obviously the ports in the Black Sea have not been operating at full capacity. So that's still a challenge. Brazil's going to continue, or Ukraine's going to continue to be a challenge to move out product, even though they have unbelievable pace considering what they're dealing with. Russians will have a larger wheat crop this year, so they'll be moving more wheat onto the global market as well.
And the last trade war with China led to the Phase 1 agreement, which China promised to buy a certain amount of U.S. commodities. Do you think that will happen again, or do you think the circumstances have changed too much?
I think that I think the circumstances have changed enough. I think China is just going to kind of wait the U.S. out. They're frustrated with our policies. They're frustrated with the action that the United States has taken, and right now they have record stocks in-house. Stocks are down a little bit from their highs, let me put it that way. But the fact is they can buy from Brazil, and Brazil can supply them certainly for a short to medium term. And so I think that will make a difference as well. But I think China's going to be a tough nut to crack, and they're not going to just buckle anytime soon, in my view.
We'll be back with more from the Farm Progress Show right after the break.
Trial lawyers are using a discredited report from a World Health Organization sub-agency to attack a safe, American-made weed-fighting tool. This critical tool helps keep your food costs down, and without it, food inflation could double. Stand with American farmers and keep trial lawyers' greed out of our farms and food supply. Fight back. Call your local representative.
Clean Fuels Alliance America is leading the way toward cleaner air, stronger local economies, and reduced dependence on fossil fuels. The industry uses more than 1 billion pounds of soybean oil every month to produce clean fuels. Biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel deliver immediate reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in heavy-duty transportation industries. We're growing better, cleaner fuels for today and tomorrow.
The U.S. is expecting a bin-busting record corn crop this fall. We asked Jed Bauer, the National Corn Growers Association first vice president, his thoughts on the report and how the U.S. continues expanding markets as harvest is on the horizon.
Well, sure. It's exciting. We got a great crop in America. We're one of the best in the world at what we do. And it is a little scary, though. We're looking at record exports right now. But the price of corn's pretty tough. And as we look at a big crop, that price is going to get a little harder. And we've got to continue to build out these export markets around the world, drive demand, but also just locally. I mean, here in the U.S., we've got to build demand. E-15 is a great step to burn up a few billion bushels. If we can just get that over the mark. And it's so frustrating. Been working on this for years. And it's a shame now that we're on the verge of a crisis in rural America, that people are now taking note and realizing that, oh no, we need to do something for farmers. When we've been on the Hill, we've been everywhere working these issues for so long, trying to explain to them that this issue will come. And now that it's here, it's just pushing and helping people understand, we're in a dire strait right now with the amount of corn that we're looking to produce, as you mentioned, and the markets the way they are, input prices high. It's definitely a struggle, and we have got to get something over with this.
You mentioned that record corn crop. It puts focus on the need for diversifying markets. How is increasing ethanol production one avenue for that?
Oh, I think it's an easy avenue. It's an easy fix. We talk about it all the time when we're on the Hill, and we are being positive right now. I know I can be a little negative because we've been working on it so long, but I think this is an easy way to use up some corn. And when I say some corn, I'm talking a lot of corn. Like it could be, for every 1% blend we go up, it's 500 million bushels. So if you go up 5, that's potentially another 2.5 billion bushels. And when we continue on the yield trend that we're on, we have to have ways to use up these piles of corn.
And Representative Dusty Johnson last week expressed optimism about year-round E-15 being passed by the end of the year. I'm curious, what legislative vehicle do you see that happening through, and why is that? You mentioned why it's so important to you producers.
It is. And when you start talking about vehicles, I'll be honest, there's a few, but we'll take anything we can get. I mean, we are at that point right now in rural America. Any avenue we can get this across the line, I think, is where we are. And we are in constant communications trying to find ways to get that. I want to tell you which one we're really pushing for, but we'll take anything right now because corn farmers are desperate.
And it looks like the Make America Healthy Again strategy will largely leave pesticides alone, but I'm curious, President Trump seems to be pushing soda makers to switch from corn sweetener to cane sugar. Are you concerned that high fructose corn syrup is going to get a bad name in this?
No, with the Make America Healthy Again, I think we all can get behind that. And there's been so much research done, as you mentioned on the pesticide front. All that research has been done. There's no reason to recreate it. It's the same with the high fructose corn syrup. That research has been done for years. It's a safe product. We've been using it for decades. It's all about consumption. And we all believe Americans need to be healthier. But don't pick on rural America when everything that we're doing has been researched and has been proven healthy.
We'll be back with more from the Farm Progress Show right after this.
I think some of sustainability to farmers just comes second nature. If you asked a farmer, are you sustainable? They'd probably look at you maybe a little funny and say, I don't think I'm doing anything that special, but it really is just what they do. We're all farmers, and our goal is taking the best care of our land, our cattle, our natural resources.
This is my sustainability story.
It's not as simple just to wake up one day and go, I want to be a conservation farmer. You're changing how your farming practice is done. You're changing your operation.
Farm Credit supported John and Kelly Watley as they shifted to more sustainable farming, improving the environment where they farm and live. Learn more at farmcredit.com/climate.
Dozens of U.S. trading partners were hit with higher tariffs after President Trump's August 1st negotiating deadline passed. We asked Austin Gellings with the Association of Equipment Manufacturers how the ongoing trade uncertainty is affecting the equipment sector.
Yeah, it's something that all of our members and the equipment manufacturers are having to deal with and navigate. And I think really at the end of the day, what they're looking for is just certainty, right? Certainty in is they're planning for, as we're heading into 2026, what's that going to look like as they're trying to provide the solutions to farmers so at the end of the day, they can continue to try to produce and provide everybody with a safe and reliable food supply. So just really navigating that and then looking for what's that going to look like, over the next couple of months, couple of years, so that they can plan for that and provide that level of certainty to the consumer and the farmer as well.
And higher costs for the industry could eventually reach farmers who will be purchasing this equipment. I'm curious, how soon could that be? How soon could farmers see a higher price tag on this equipment?
I think I'll leave that to our members, but. At the end of the day, I know that a lot of our members, they're working hard in order to make sure that the farmer is the least impacted as they're navigating this. And so, every company is going to approach that different, and they've got their strategy on how they're going to do that. So it's just navigating, how is it impacting their company and navigating the change as it comes. And I think that's, going back to my previous point as well, if we can get some certainty as what's this going to look like in the long term, that helps them then, not only make those plans, but then be able to, make those decisions on long term, what's that going to look like, both for them as a company, but then also, how they're going to work with their customers as well.
And in addition to trade uncertainty, the industry is seeing high interest rates and falling commodity prices as well. How have you seen sales and shipments of products change this year alone?
Yeah, I think the reality is, it's not breaking news. The market's down, and the equipment manufacturers aren't immune to that. And they're certainly doing their best to continue to provide farmers with the solutions that they need. And I think as we look towards the future, hopefully commodity prices can rebound, but technology, if you want to put a silver lining on things, technology really has the opportunity to, when we're operating on slim margins like we are and prices are down, technology can help kind of optimize other areas of the operation where you can hopefully see an ROI and improve those margins just a little bit. And so, when you look long term, that's where there's maybe a little bit of hope and optimism.
And farm countries started the year off worried about new trade wars. Do you believe farmers and the ag equipment sector are better off or worse off with the deals that President Trump has announced so far and is working on?
I think that, I think at the end of the day, we're all in support of, trying to make U.S. and North American-based manufacturing stronger. And so we want to be partners to the administration to do that, while also making sure that we can provide that certainty to the farmer, as they're looking to, make their decisions and plan out. We want to be able to provide them certainty in terms of, from the equipment side of things specifically, as they're thinking about making new purchases and planning.
We'll be back with more Newsmakers right after the break.
Trial lawyers are using a discredited report from a World Health Organization subagency to attack a safe, American-made weed-fighting tool. This critical tool helps keep your food costs down, and without it, food inflation could double. Stand with American farmers and keep trial lawyers' greed out of our farms and food supply. Fight back. Call your local representative.
Clean Fuels Alliance America is leading the way toward cleaner air, stronger local economies, and reduced dependence on fossil fuels. The industry uses more than 1 billion pounds of soybean oil every month to produce clean fuels. Biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel deliver immediate reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in heavy-duty transportation industries. We're growing better, cleaner fuels for today and tomorrow.
China is the largest customer of U.S. soybeans, yet they've made no purchases this year. We asked Rob Ewoltz with the United Soybean Board what market diversification USB is looking at as harvest approaches.
It's almost impossible to make up for what China would purchase, but we're looking at diversifying into other countries around the world and meeting with different buyers that are coming to the States, and we had 59 different countries come and were represented at Soy Connects in Washington, D.C. last night that are all interested in our U.S. soy. So we're trying to move into maybe get a little bit bigger market in the European Union. We fit very well into their program when it comes to conservation and carbon index scoring and all of that. So I think there's opportunities there. We have other countries that are interested in our quality when it comes to aquaculture feed in Southeast Asia. So we are diversifying and trying to push into other countries.
And you mentioned some of that international diversification. How do you see diversification here in the domestic market?
Yeah, we're domestic markets we can control and play a little bit more in and have a little bit better influence. And we're seeing great things happening when it comes to high oleic soybeans. The U.S. farmer has invested through the checkoff in high oleic beans for about 10 years, and it started off as a food grade thing, and now we found out that there is great benefits to the dairies to feed roasted whole high oleic soybean oil. It's really increasing the butterfat content and giving those dairy farmers a premium. And so if I was a U.S. farmer growing soybeans next to a dairy farm, I think I'd be contacting up and saying, hey, any chance you would like to do this high oleic soybean? And what a great opportunity. We might have about 7 million cows out there, and each cow eats about an acre of beans a year. So that's about 7 million acres of high oleic beans that we could move without having to export. And I think that's a great win for the U.S. farmer.
You lead the infrastructure and export portfolio at USB. As we look ahead to harvest beginning soon, how do you view the status of those systems in the U.S. and what's being done to improve those?
Well, with the increased soybean crush that's happening in the United States, we know that we have a lot of meal that has to be moved for export, and so we have invested in New Orleans, deepening the port down there to make more efficient use of those bigger ships. We've also invested in Port of Houston to move some soybean meal. We've invested in the Pacific Northwest to move soybean meal because we know that that's an important part of the crush. We want to use the oil domestically, but we need to move the protein. So those investments are being made to try to improve the efficiencies and to lower the cost to our end users so that way they'll buy more.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Agri-Pulse Newsmakers. Both the House and Senate will return to Washington next week after the August recess. Tune in next week and check our website anytime for the latest on all things food, farm, and fuel policy. For Agri-Pulse, I'm Lydia Johnson. Thanks for watching.
Newsmakers is a production of Agri-Pulse Communications. You can also find our new content on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow Agri-Pulse and our correspondents on social media to get breaking news and more. For agriculture, trade, food, environment, and regulatory news, your source is agripulse.com.